that Florida State and Clemson are meeting today to discuss a settlement with the ACC that includes a new revenue distribution model. Chris, what does that mean?
Basically, we've got a short-term fix in Florida State and Clemson's legal fights to try to kind of get out of the ACC. They've not had a lot of luck with that yet, but it's a very long court process. So eventually the sides are coming to an agreement in which like 60% of the money that ACC schools get is going to be tied to television ratings and other brand measurements. It's not exactly clear how they're going to calculate that. But the teams that draw more television eyeballs are going to get more money. The ones who draw less will get less. There's also the incentives. If you make the tournament or you make the playoff, you get to keep that money within the conference. So if you win, you get to keep your money instead of sharing with everybody. And reportedly, there could be a agreement from everybody to lessen the penalties to leave the conference later on. Because
Don't do it, guys.
When the Big Ten and SEC deals come up at the early 2030s, that's when kind of the next big round of realignment is probably going to happen. The ACC schools are stuck till 2036. So this is essentially what Florida State was kind of asking for at the beginning anyway. Easier to get out later, get some more money now. The ACC will be stable for the next 5 or so years, and everybody will move on, pretend to play nice for a couple of years. Dave, if this sounds familiar...
Oh, yes.
If this sounds familiar to any college football fans, it's because this has happened before. The Big 12, about a decade plus ago, did this where Texas and Oklahoma got more money for having better TV ratings. Dave, you were in the thick of that, covering that.
Very much so.
Can you tell me how that went and how it turned out?
Well, so you start, Colorado sort of leaves, just sort of, it's its own thing. But Texas A&M and Nebraska and Missouri are kind of looking elsewhere. Obviously, Nebraska and Missouri are the first ones, or Nebraska's the first ones off the boat there with Colorado, and then Texas A&M and Missouri follow suit in the SEC later. And you're sitting there with the Big 12, and you have these two outsized brands with the rest of the league. Pejoratively, people like to call it the Big 2 and the Little 8. And as long as that arrangement was there, where Texas and Oklahoma were way more valuable than every other team in the conference, they were always going to be looking kind of side-eye and not trusting them, because everybody in the Big 12 kind of knew, hey, if they get a ticket to the Big 10 or the SEC, like, they're going to screw us. And lo and behold, guess what happened a few years later? The opportunity for Oklahoma and Texas to leave for the SEC happened, and they took it and broke apart some rivalries and made people mad, and now we don't have Bedlam and all these things. The ACC, in a pretty similar position, not quite as clear, where you have Florida State and Clemson, sitting there. They've been on the field more valuable, but, depending on and who you talk to, the value of North Carolina is something that is, not really, doesn't really have an analogy to the Big 12, back in the day. So it's going to be uncomfortable. There's going to be a lot of mistrust, distrust. It's good to write about, not good to be an administrator or an athletic director or a coach in the league. But yeah, we're going to get 5 years of, lowering the heat from a boil to a simmer, I suppose. It would be how I'd put it.
And I am curious how you calculate this. I don't think it's been determined, because I think ESPN noted that Georgia Tech actually had the highest ratings for the ACC last year, because they had the week 0 game with Florida State. They had the Georgia game that goes to 8 overtimes. The ACC network is not a rated television network. So, how do you calculate that? SMU Pitt was a ranked versus ranked game on ACC network. So very curious how they're going to kind of figure that out. But the hope is you could get, perhaps 10 to 15 million more if you're top achieving in the ACC, and that'll get you closer to the Big Ten SEC for now. But again, we'll probably have these realignment fights in, 4 or 5 years.